Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spin Rack, and we also have.
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
I'm going to hand over the con to Calvin. Will you want to lead us off in this thing?
Sure. We're doing Fantastic Four?
We're doing the Fantastic Four and Challengers of the Unknown #3.
All right. Okay, so this is more, what's the right word for it? Like legendary rumor. Supposedly, the rumor, okay, or the legend goes that the Fantastic Four is based off of the story that appears in Challengers of the Unknown #3. Now, in Challengers of the Unknown #3, which was, I believe, written and illustrated by Jack Kirby. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Oh, I guess I'm right. Hold on. Let me, I can give you who wrote it in this book I have here. Let's see. It is unknown. It is unknown. They're not sure. It could be Kirby. It could be Dave or Dick Wood. It could be one of the people in the DC stable, but it's unknown who wrote that.
All right. Okay. Well, that of course allows it to really get a lot of mileage. But there is some belief that the Fantastic. Well, I'll be more brass tacks with it. The idea was that Stan Lee didn't create the Fantastic Four. That this was a Jack Kirby idea, 100%. And then the argument for it is that Challenges of the Unknown #3 features the Fantastic, at least the prototype for the Fantastic Four. So if you read the story, one of the characters ends up gaining superpowers. Okay, he goes to space, and when he comes back, he has 4 distinct abilities. He has fire projection, ice projection, size manipulation, and invisibility. That may sound very familiar. To all you cats out over there. And that was the basis for this particular rumor / argument / let's kick Stan in the teeth one more time, because because he never created anything. He stole everything from everyone. But the question poses, well, is how much of this is actually there? Is the Fantastic Four a direct ripoff of what we saw in Challenges of the Unknown #3, which that issue came out of, what is it, 3 years, 2-3 years before it was 1958. So let's say 3 years before the Fantastic Four debuts. Is the other stuff that we heard where Stan Lee wanted to do, he got orders from on high from Martin Goodwin to do another version of the Justice League, and he said he wanted to write it a certain way, and his wife said, well, why don't you do that? Is all of that stuff just hogwash? And it was pretty much just Kirby's idea from start to finish, and Stan Lee lifted it and ran with it. Well, that's what we're going to be looking at today.
All right. So with that said, one of the particulars in this story is, outside of saying they're not sure who wrote it, is that Rocky is sent up in space with an element. It's not the cosmic rays. He's sent up in space with an element that will help people in space adapt to any sort of environment. And that's where his powers derives from. He kind of, when he comes back, he is able, that's why he gets cold. If he needs the camouflage, he goes invisible. The blast, I can't really connect that to the Human Torch, because the Marvel timely comic books had a Human Torch. So
right,
let's just X out that part. You can go to invisibility, maybe, that sort of thing. But you can clearly see they're sending up in space with an element. And they sent a little monkey up in space with this element, and he was able to adapt. But then he went kind of nuts, right? He's kind of lost some memory while he went there, and he hooks up with these nutty guys. And at the same time, there's a bunch of other powers that the Fantastic Four don't utilize at the same time. But at the same time, people look at the invisibility, shooting blasts from his hands, must be a creation of that. Now, one of the things that people don't always look at, because they look at the Challengers and they're like, hey, the Challengers, look, they're in all the same uniforms, and there are 4 of them. and not looking at it being just possibly just derivative, just saying I'm
Well,
giving these guys uniforms too. I'm giving the well, actually, the FF didn't have uniforms when they started.
no,
Stan didn't
they,
want them to. He wanted them to be in regular clothes, and even the thing he wears a trench coat all the time.
right. Their uniforms don't debut into what? Fantastic Four 3?
Yep.
Fantastic Four 3, and then the thing, of course, will, his will change. His will change over time. But again, see, and this is where people start to run aground. The fact that the Fantastic Four has uniforms, and then you see that the Challenges of the Unknown also have uniforms. And remind you, the Challenges of the Unknown. This is just they were only they were created 3 years before. That's only issue 3 in 1958. So it's not that much time between the two of them. The question you want to ask is, well, were there any other teams, any other books where you had guys running around and they all wore uniforms to identify themselves before the Challenges of the Unknown? The answer, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And, you can go back to the Golden Age and find this type of stuff. So this isn't something, again, this is definitely more derivative. It's something that works, like like Superman's outfit, and it just gets adapted because, again, all of that goes back to him anyway. They're all in the uniform, trunks. Okay. So no issue right over there. I always thought that Rocky and the abilities that he displayed were more of an influence on the Super Skrull than they were on the actual the Fantastic Four. Like, hey, we get the Super Skrull, and he has all their particular abilities, and it works because he's an alien. So we can actually, I don't think they were probably going that deep into thought into it, but we can actually have somebody who can maintain all four of these abilities without having to explain too much why, since Skrulls can take any particular shape and we can just voice them on here. I always thought that was closer to it. But then, I mean, you have the distinct differences in terms of the story with the four going up, the cosmic rays coming, they come back. You made a really good point with the Human Torch already being somebody who had been in the Marvel stable, so you can't count that. If anything, then you have to say, well, hey, they lifted the Human Torch, so they just took the Human Torch back at the end of the day. Size manipulation doesn't really apply to Mr. Fantastic. That is more of a plastic man, elongated man feature, if anything. And then you have invisibility. This is not the first character to be invisible. This is not the first character to be invisible either. So these are, for lack of a better term, these are public domain abilities where you can pretty much do what you like with them. You also want to look at the stuff that happened with a character, say like the Invisible Girl, where her initial ability of being invisible is definitely expanded with the force field, and then the ability to create these invisible objects, things that would go on with the torch, and that Mr. Fantastic's ability. Uh, their abilities seem to represent more the traditional four elements. But Mr. Fantastic's major thing that he brings to the table is not necessarily his ability to manipulate his body and stretch, but his intellect, which is which is clearly different than what's going on in the challenges of the unknown. The other big draw, that the challenges of the unknown were challengers without powers, and they were able to get through all of these situations with they had what is it? You had the brain. You had what is it? What's the four again? You have the brain, the ace,
Hey,
the brawn, and the chick.
well,
So
not the chick. What's the name? We talking about the challenges, right? Then you have he's not. He's a daredevil. He's kind of the daredevil. But the thing is, it's
I was
hard.
the Daredevil is the ace. So
That's he'd have to be the pilot then, right?
yeah, yeah,
Red would be the daredevil, and then Ace would be the pilot. And or you didn't, then you just knock. You can't get rid of Red. Now, one of were you still going? I was going to add something here. With this, with the thing about it, they're not really. They don't. The hard part in looking at these guys in comparison to the FF right here, right? You got these guys. Is that this is old school storytelling, right? And they draw from the same place. They draw from what is it, the Lost Horizon, and I think Mars was here. We talked a little bit about it. Is that when you get to this pulp area, this type of stuff, of the was it Swiss Family Robinson, that sort of thing, anything, the Sun Devils, any of that, they're all
right.
kind of drawing from the same pool, and you can see in this type of thing kind of pulling from. But Marvel takes it one step further. When they do the Fantastic Four, they're like, hey, we're not only gonna take the Human Torch and put this in there, we're gonna take the whole first Justice League issue and we're gonna borrow as much of that as we can. We're gonna take the framework where they're all doing something, but they get the call. They get there's a call that's made out to them. They meet up the same way. The only difference is giving you the origin story, which the other one they're just facing Starro right after that. But
Yeah.
in this
And
one,
the
they
idea, and that was directly the idea. This was supposed to be Marvel's Justice League.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's why they were, that's the history. That's on record. This was the, hey, look at that Justice League book over there. Marvel did their normal thing. What is it? Hey, up Periscope. Let's see what's going on in the DC offices. Hey, look at that. Let's do that. Let's
in
let's
the
do that at the end of the day.
And the
Okay.
cover layout is the same. Only the thing is that they have five characters and Fantastic Four has four. But it's the
Right.
layout of having them in that sort of same sort of space where you wonder why Reed Richards is tangled, but you see the bottom characters kind of held by Starro, one of Starro's arms. So
Yeah, it's at best you could call, I guess the best you could call it is an homage, and at worst it's just out and out theft.
mhm.
Yeah, but it's especially with the science fiction stuff. People were just gonna go to the tried and true stuff, and the good thing about it, I would love to say, is that the Fantastic Four, that issue is how they got started, and where they went from there was just all was yeah, all new territory. A lot of great stuff that happened in terms of their adventures and characters and so on and so forth. So there was just a lot more. That's definitely where they started, but it sure as heck is not where they ended up.
Yeah, and the thing about the challengers, and this is not a knock, these are just guys of action. They're challenging. The hook of the book is living on borrowed time. So whenever an event goes on, that's how Rocky got to go up in space. They draw straws, and Rocky the one who won, and right, he's gonna take a chance of chancing his life with this element, and then they find out, oh, the monkey died. What could happen to Rocky? So at the same time, the challenges also have when you brought up the female, they have a supporting character in June who's their computer technologist, right? But she's not an official member. But she's pining to become a challenger the entire time. But at the same time, she's probably the most spunky character out of all of them, even though she's kind of direct. The rest of them are just men of action, straightforward. Red isn't the hothead. The only one that has a little bit of science to him is the professor, Professor Haley, but even he is pretty much just straightforward. There's just a slight thing in his personality, but this is before the time of personalities where people just went and did the action. So you have even Ace, who's kind of the leader. He just maybe slightly a little bit taller than the rest, but he is like they basically are a team of four guys, and they're all chancing life. Where the Fantastic Four are more the classic heroes, like the Justice League. They're out. There's something they get notified about this thing that's going on, and they're here to help, not trying to chance their life. Not trying to be more like daredevils and that sort of thing. So, in the personalities, that's one thing we can't escape. That having Johnny actually being a hothead, he leaves the team in issue 3. Ben is constantly fighting with them. Sue, of course, has her female moments where she's like upset about whatever it is. Reed is yelling at them from time. They get in a fight in the first issue.
Yeah, they're dysfunctional. Well, I don't want to call them dysfunctional. Wouldn't be fair. They're a family.
Yeah,
Okay, they're a family with the two brothers who the older brother and the younger brother consistently bickering, worrying mom. Dad, like, what the hell is going on? I got stuff to do. I got work to do over here. I can't keep watching you. I can't keep watching you guys. And it worked. It still works to this day. I mean, especially the Johnny and I remember reading some of the books just hoping for a prank between the two of them, like Johnny would do something, and then see the whole, and then wondering, I wonder if the thing is actually going to catch him this time.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that the thing that I think they almost did it so much that the rest of the Marvel universe kind of fed off of everything the Fantastic Four did, where the FF kind of in the 70s kind of became cliche because they've done everything. And then when you see the Avengers do it, or you see the X-Men do it, or you see the new Teen Titans do the FF storytelling, it's like, wow, new and great. And then you go back to the Fantastic Four, you're like, wow, they kind of did everything. Like even the mundane stuff that you see in the like, because what was it like the what's those things, the Incredibles, like having those mundane things of him walking around crashing through the trying to do regular stuff, and it never works out because he's too big and cumbersome. So one of the things is that the I know that we'd love to just give it to one guy and say that since Jack, well, the challenges is also an idea that was between Kirby and Joe Simon. It's like one of the last. It was with all of their stuff that they were doing as far as their space things, and this is when they split up. He took this idea and he worked with his writers and himself coming up with his own stories, and of course DC had stories that they were adding. I mean, basically, it's like an assembly. They were trying to get stuff into this thing because they had a successful book, and it seemed like it was all hands on deck trying to put this thing together. And Kirby says when he was working on it, like sometimes those other guys were kind of eccentric. It was kind of tough getting stories out of them, so that's why he was writing some of it. But I mean, ultimately, they give all the credit to Kirby. And then now, I know he at this portion here, when the classic period, Kirby was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But let's not try to take everything away from Stan and say nothing, because at the same time, we got Martin Goodman who's saying, "Hey, let's copy this book." We're not giving, and that's basically like a studio exec saying, "Hey, I want an A team," and then someone comes up and a writer gets to create that portion. The way the guild works, that the writer who comes up with it gets most of the credit, and obviously the studio exec gets a lot of the money, because he's producing it. He's the man behind it. So that's the same with Martin Goodman. He's like, "Hey, do this," but all of that stuff has kind of been extracted, saying, because we've had interviews with Kirby or stuff he wrote down saying that, well, I did all this. And it's mostly, I mean, I know out of the bad feelings and a lot of people kind of being upset with Stan in general, saying, hey, so it kind of probably built the myth in his own head that he did everything when he did a lot. I'm not trying to take anything from him, because there's a lot of times even Stan, the one who told us that Kirby did a lot was Stan himself, so it's not like he was saying, hey, a lot of plots came from him. Sometimes he told me where the story, what the story is going to be. Sometimes I just said, hey, let the next villain be Doctor Doom. And then when Kirby heard that, got him. He told the truth. Secretly, like, no, he said it in print. He's trying to build him up. It's like, no, I got him. Finally in print.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to argue that, hey, this guy never gave credit, when we all know, like, the reason why we even know about this stuff is because he's the one who said it. This is not, again, Stan, we've said this more than once. Stan Lee's relationship with the people he collaborated with is not Bob Kane and Bill Finger.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's not Bob Kane at all. Well, Bob Kane would say, hey, this has been drawn by Bob Kane, and Bob Kane didn't even lift a finger to draw it. It's up totally. This was not that. It was not that case. And all inconsistencies aside and all bickering aside, mm-hmm. It's not something that would have happened without what both of the guys were bringing to the table, because Fantastic Four #1 is just not, that's the start. That is the start. It's, and of course it turns into this classic start at the end of the day, but the marching orders are followed and adhered to with Fantastic Four #1. You get to Fantastic Four #2, they're off to the races. Okay, they're off to the races, and it's just a thrill ride all the way through 100. Not that it stops there.
Dude, they don't even know that they got a. They don't even know they got a hit in issue 2, because issue 2 is so brilliant in the beginning, and it ends so wacky that they go to the scroll world with comic books and say, this is some of the stuff that's going to stop you, where it's just like, we need an ending to this, when it's so like to do a second issue.
And it's so science fiction. It's just that's such a sci-fi story with the guys remain on Earth and their cows, and it's like some Twilight Zone type stuff at the end of the day. It's just really wild. Even stuff that they Byrne was able to tap later, that, the cows gave milk, and the milk, and the milk. and the milk did this. I was like, the cows could give milk. I was like, good grief. I hope they didn't mate with some of the other cows, have little squirrel cow babies, along the what is it, the tainted cow milk. But it was just, again, you look at that first issue. You look at that first issue, and you have some of the less of sci-fi, more like, I think that's more like that's definitely more challengers, adventure, going underground, meeting the mole man, that type of stuff, and getting out of there before it's too late. But then the second one, you definitely have some sci-fi. Then by the third, I think honestly, by the third, if you're a kid reading this, the Fantastic Four is great because you don't know what's going to happen. You, you
Oh,
you've literally had 3 issues, and it's been different over 3 different issues. It's got to be just a great thrill ride.
but in issue 3, the one thing that doesn't match the challenges in those uniforms is that the FF had masks. They had Robin like masks. They
Yep,
had the eye things, and then
they had the they had the
Stan,
dominoes, the
Stan
domino
is like,
masks.
wipe that out. I'm not doing that to my characters. We give them costumes. Everyone already knows who they are. Let's not cover. Let's I mean, that's almost akin to the what's those guys, the Legion of Superheroes, because they're the ones that kind of took the masks off people, and then Fantastic Four had public heroes, so it's not the same thing. But the first, like really trying outside of obviously Superman, but Superman still had a secret identity, and the challenge. I mean, the Legion didn't have a secret identity; they just had code names. The Fantastic Four were public heroes, so in the present day, so it was kind of a little bit different. But it kind of the really getting that ball rolling until you get to the X-Men. It's like, why did the X-Men not have masks except for Wolverine? Can't anyone tell who the X-Men? Shouldn't the X-Men know the costumes are just cool? So we're just foregoing the mask on Storm and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, the thing of it is, if it's gonna be, people kind of throw out some of the stuff that they already know about the Fantastic Four, and that's saying that yes, Stan is going to be overworked. Of course, Kirby's coming in with a lot of stuff, and the plots, we've seen some of the plots, and regretfully, some of the historians, well, one of the historians who said he saw a bunch of Stan's plots, and that could say, hey, Stan is given 1 page, 2 pages, one paragraph, like a couple plots, 3 plots, 3 paragraphs on a page. We've seen some of that stuff in the Jack Kirby collector, but they don't even want to stand on that anymore. They want to be like, and they say that Kirby kept all of those plots that he got from Stan, like Avengers 4, all of that stuff, and now they say they never saw that. So that's Mark Everner, a historian. It's not me making it up. He said it in print in, I think, Amazing Heroes. So there were plots that were given. Now that's the thing. You can debate how much he added. That's why I always use the New York Herald Tribune article where he gives a plotting session, and you compare that story to FF55. It's well fleshed out, well beyond what we saw in that thing. And say, no, that was fake. That was fake. We already had something. It's like, what is it? The writer didn't mistake it. He said they have an ESP session with the artist. That means that there's no way to get all that information into the artist. If you're not functionally illiterate, he's not. I think some of the other stuff he said, and then once Stan, what Kirby was upset about that article, Stan didn't promote it at all, and the writer was like, "Hey, Stan, why didn't you say anything in your blurbs about the article we made?" It's like, well, you got Kirby upset. Like, you want my top artist to be, coming back here and kill me? He thinks I caused this. And you're like, oh, because he's like, he said they added it saying that Kirby fell from his chair, which he didn't. He kind of just said, and the difference is that Roy Thomas said Kirby said a lot, and the writer didn't use any of that, and Kirby was a fan of this writer, which is what Mark Everner said, and he was really upset. But he looked at it because obviously he can't take it out on the writer, so he took it. He was upset with Stan, and Stan kind of backed Kirby and said, "I can't promote this thing now," and that's why they did a later thing with Rolling Stone with after Kirby left, but you could see Stan was still sad. It's before the Funky Flashman, but Stan was still sad about Kirby leaving. So it is what it is.
Yeah, it is. But still great work. I mean, look, the behind the scenes. I mean, we're both comic historians, so the behind the scenes stuff for us is really interesting, and we got to take it as it is. But I always remind myself that despite the I mean, there were good times and there were definitely bad times. But the one thing I can always reconcile all of that stuff with is the great work that they left behind that we can always revisit anytime we choose and really thrill to it. So did so just to answer the question, no, no challenges. Without a doubt, they drew on a whole bunch of the stuff that was already there, but that's just what was done. They were like, okay, we need to do a story. Well, I don't have any ideas. Well, use this. Use
Well,
this.
I mean,
Give them one of these stories. They love this stuff.
yeah, I mean, neither of them above using something that was already there, but then ultimately, once it became, I think, feeling that one of the FF stories, the Corgo or something like that, that one might have been a Challenger story, but where they kind of reworked it for that. But ultimately, one of the things that the flair, the sort of the I mean, now it looks kind of cheesy, but at the time, the romantic, like the triangle that was going on in there, the stuff that hadn't been seen in sort of the mainstream comic books outside of, Lois Lane having a romantic triangle with the same person, with Clark Kent and Superman, where we had this thing where we had this person who's sort of engaged, was engaged to Reed, and she falls for the Submariner at the same time, and she has to make a choice within the book. And as we're reading it, we don't know which one she's going to choose. It's
Yep.
that heavy drama to it. So,
Yeah.
like,
But even as a kid, I remember reading it and I'm looking at this and I was kind of like, wait a minute. Hey,
the,
hey, he's the bad guy. He's like, yeah, he's the bad guy, all right.
the the next issue when she's got the picture of him, and then the Human Torch comes, and he's just like burn. He burns it. He snatches from us and burns it, and then then the Submariner comes. He comes and appears, but he's got this plan with Doctor Doom to take Sue out, and then they capture the FF, and then the Human Torch says, "Oh no, he's here," and the thing is ready to fight, and the Human Torch comes around there, and then Sue stands in front of him. I was like, "Oh no, you're breaking my heart, Sue." No, but it was a real powerful scene. And then, of course, the Submariner has to help them because he's captured with them. So the stories they were just really early on, like just really inventing the stuff as they go. And then once they
Yep.
got to 40, issue 44, it just went and just shot through the roof.
They they
Unparalleled.
create and they created a new superpower for the Submariner that was almost never used again, but it allowed him to defeat Doctor Doom. And but but good old Submariner, good old Namor, and Doctor Doom would get together again for supervillain team up, which was never done anywhere
Mm-hmm.
else. Which was never done anywhere else. Hey, just great stuff. And the inspiration, I don't know. I mean, back then I think it was a lot easier just to be inspired by something or use it as a starting point, use it as a framework and go from there. And, you know, it just this was just going to be a common practice, and it was just done. And then now, of course, we look at stuff and stuff needs to be 100% organic. It needs to be 100% original. It wasn't influenced by anything, which is just impossible to do or say. You would have to be in a total vacuum from anything else going on. Everything is inspired by something else, and the obvious influences are there. But to direct and say this is just a rip of what was going on in Challengers, no. Number one, and then number two, again, if you go back, you can find some stuff where, and it's not too hard if you go through the science fiction stuff where, hey, this was the challenges were easily influenced by a whole bunch of stuff that would have come before. Even the actual team, even actually the four-man team was not unique to the challengers.
Yeah.
So look, things get inspired by other stuff. A lot of stuff gets inspired by other stuff, and it doesn't really have any resonance. So it really does show, look, you can be inspired by something like a four-man team or a superhero, and unless you're really putting something quality into it, it's not gonna resonate. It's not gonna stand the test of time. And without a doubt, the Fantastic Four stand the test of time. We will see them in theaters, I believe, in 2023.
And regretfully, the problem with the challenge is that they lost Kirby, but it went on for like almost 90 issues.
Yep.
and they kind of gained personalities as it went along. The thing is that people have run away from these characters, and they put them in different outfits. When these, like I think in Crisis, I know we're dragging this one out. In Crisis over here, um, was it Perez went back to the early outfits, which looked really cool, and then he did them again in the what's that thing, the Brave and the Bold series, where they're the backstory of the side story of the main team up. They're throughout each issue and getting to see Perez do the challengers, which is exciting. And they, of course, they're even more daredevil than they are ever. And they're like, it's a real, the end of that 12th issue is a big build up to the challengers and doing something big with June, because June is one of the, even though I think in the later series, she married Professor Haley, and then of course the Jeff Loeb one kind of turned everything on its heel. But yes, there's some good stuff in there too. So you should be reading both of those series. And if you're a fan, like keep going. There's other four man group or that sort of dynamic that really is really an entertaining thing. So that's my last thing to say. I got both of them. That's why I got both. You're not taking my challenges away, saying this is just a sorry FF. Nope. They're both quality
Did
stuff.
they ever do an absolute for challengers? An
No,
absolute
this
edition?
just the omnibus of all the Kirby issues. So it got
Uh,
all that in one.
Maybe one of these days I'll pick that up. I always hold out, like maybe they'll do an omnibus. I'm not an omnibus, but an absolute edition, and I'll pick it up then. I've got well, I have limited room on the bookshelf. So if you're getting on the bookshelf, I usually try to reserve some room for the absolutes because this happened too many times. Like, okay, let me get this. Oh no, they did the absolute. I'm running out of room. I'm running out of room.
All right, so I guess that's about it.
That's about the size of it.
You guys out there want to chime and talk about this? I know there's a lot of people that want to say, now the voice of the stand defenders are kind of gone. So anyone else that want to chime in, and we're here to talk and debate. There's no thing. We love both of the guys. I
Yep.
guess Spinnerack.
Oh, but one caveat,
Well,
okay? One caveat. We are definitely willing to talk, definitely willing to debate, but we will play this fair. And if you try to muck rake on Stan, we will take you out. Don't
all
do
right.
not forget. Do not forget that, okay? Don't come in here and think for one second, okay? We take sides when it comes to Stan Lee or to Jack Kirby, okay? We love both of them. We will
Yeah.
not see either of them malign. So regardless of regardless of the time frame or how trends go, that's where the spinning rack stands. So if you step in here, okay, step correctly, because we will.
And that's the same. Even like Frank Miller, who stood with Kirby on a lot of things against the original art thing that he was going through for the early work, and they tried to drag Frank in there to say, "Hey, like almost Kirby compared to Stan," and he's like, "Come on, guys, you know what I think about Stan? Like, I mean, like I've used when I was doing Rusty, the big guy in Rusty Road, I used a ton of Stan's tricks in it. Everyone knows how I feel about Kirby, and you should definitely know how I feel about Stan. So you can love both and not have to tear one down and say one was as you said, the Bob Kane of the crew, when neither of them owned anything, and Stan had to take Marvel to court in his exec job. It was an job he did from '70s on, and he had to, like that's what his job was. His job wasn't getting money from the Marvel books. The only royalty he actually probably really got was the Kiss book from David Anthony Kraft connected with the Kiss people. That was the actual royalty that he got outside of possibly, no, I don't know if he got any royalties from Ravage or anything like that. Maybe one of those graphic novels, he might have got a royalty from the Parable. Maybe that one. Yeah.
Well, I would say, look, Stan Lee is what normally happens. Normally, Stan Lee is middle management.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, normally middle management does the job and nobody ever hears about them. Nobody knows about most people don't even know about Martin Goodwin, and he's the publisher.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't know about the editors, or most people don't know who Julie Schwartz was. They don't know who Mort Wessinger was. They don't know who any of these guys were. Stan devised he devised that particular convention because of the love that he had for what he was doing. When he became the face, when he inadvertently became the face of Marvel Comics, and then when they're acquired, they're like, no, we need this guy. We want him to stay. We want him to stay on because they saw what the situation was and how integral he was to making certain that this was still a viable venture for them. That's that is the biggest difference at the end of the day. And to be honest, everybody should be like, yeah, this is great. This is finally, he made good. This is somebody who went over here, was doing the job, middle management, and then it becomes, well, we're gonna slate him because he was successful and he went on and he became, synonymous with Marvel Comic. But look at all these other guys. Well, they helped too, and so on and so forth. Hey, this is not Stan Lee saying, hey, I did it all on my own. As we said already, Stan gave a lot of credit. Okay, a lot of credit to everybody that he worked with, and that has to be something that's remembered, and that is something I'll never stop saying. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, definitely, I'm definitely certain that the criticisms that were brought up, by other people that he collaborated with have some validity in certain areas. But in the same breath, this is not, those people who want to turn this, it's now it's turn to like throw scat at Stan. No, not here. Not going to happen. The history speaks for itself, and we will always make certain that history speaks correctly.
And with that said, spin a rack.
Out.